guys, I hope you're having a lovely morning so far. Thanks for joining our webinar on knowing your strengths. For those of you that are new to Women in Tax, I thought I'd share a little bit of background. So Women in Tax was a network which was set up by volunteers, and the aim is to raise the voice of women within the profession. We work with firms and advisors to set up events which predominantly focus on skills development and also provide an area to network and share skills, share experiences and share ideas. Over the last 6 months we've been a little bit quiet because of COVID, but we're now back to running a monthly events plan, starting with this one. We're very excited that here at Parry we get to kick off the events, and today we'll be focusing on knowing your strengths. We'll be sharing some of the science behind strengths and also helping you to identify your strengths and how to use those within your day-to-day life. We want today to be as interactive as possible, so if you have any questions, there's a chat function, and we've got Steve in the background who's kindly helped us set up with the technology for today. He'll be fielding the questions and sending them through to me and Emily. The session will be structured with a question and answer session at the end to follow up on any questions we might not have answered yet. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Emily, who's our Head of People Development.
Good morning. Thank you, Megan. Hope everybody's okay. So I'm really excited to be here today talking to you about strengths. Here at Parry, strengths is a really big deal for us, and myself and Megan have spent quite a bit of time together in various different sessions talking about strengths. So Megan's strengths, her top two strengths are achiever and responsibility. So Megan really knows how to get things done and takes great responsibility in making sure that those things are done. So a good person to have on side. Would you agree, Megan? Anything else you want to say about your strengths?
I would, yeah. So I can really see the responsibility trait comes through quite well at work. If I knew something needs doing, I can't not get it done. But also with today, putting on this event, that's probably one of the reasons I volunteered in the first place, with responsibility.
Perfect. Cool. So people might be wondering what on earth we're talking about when it comes to things like belief and responsibility and achiever. So let's get stuck in, shall we?
I think we should.
Cool. Let's go. Right then, everybody, hopefully you can now see my presentation on strengths. So let me introduce myself. My name's Emily. I'm the Head of People Development here at Parry, and that means I look after things like learning, development, engagement and well-being, and basically all of the things that give you the very best chance to live your very best lives. And for us at Parry, that's about not just in work, but outside of work as well. So we talked a little bit about Megan's strengths. You can see along the bottom here that these are my strengths. WOO is one that people are always asking about, and that stands for winning others over. So one of the things that I absolutely love doing is chatting to people, connecting people, making small talk, networking events are most definitely one of the things that I love doing. So yeah, this is kind of, I'm in my element. I then have input, empathy, communication and includer. So in a nutshell, I like to gather, collect information. I love reading, listening to podcasts. And so that's my input, and I like to share it and include people in some of the things that I've read or listened to. So if you work with me, it wouldn't be unheard of for me to drop you an email and be like, I've read this or I've listened to this and thought of you. So that's my strengths in a nutshell. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about the tool that we use here at Parry as we go through. And there are quite different ones out there on the market. So Megan mentioned we definitely want to hear from you from a questions perspective. For me, having WOO and communication and includer in my strengths, it's really important to me that I get some interaction from you as we go through the session. So I'm going to be asking you some questions, there's a bit of an activity in here as well, and so I'd love it if you can use the chat function just to kind of let me know that you're here. So let's give it a go. If you can just kind of say hi and your name in the chat box, then I can see that there are some people out there wanting to get involved. I believe that you're there. That's good. That's enough for me. Hello to some of you out there. Right then, let's get started. So what we're going to cover in today's session is, like Megan mentioned, a bit of science behind strengths. Now, I am no neuroscientist, so we're not going to be talking too much about that side of things, but I think it's important to understand that strengths is kind of grounded in fact and science. A little bit about what it means for you. We're fairly limited on time, so we're not going to be able to do loads of work around kind of discovering your own strengths. I am going to give you a really good tool for how you go about discovering your own strengths. And then how you can use them going forward and why they're important and how you can put them into play in your lives. So hopefully that sounds good. Like I mentioned earlier, we use Gallup strengths here at Cooper Parry. I'll talk a bit more about that in the meantime. But there are lots of different strengths tools out there that you can use, and it may be that some of you have used them already. So this is an activity that I would do if we were in 3D in real life in a room, and we're not, but I don't think that it's something that we need to lose. So what I would love for you to do, even though I can't see you, is I'm going to ask you some questions, and I just want you to kind of put your hands up or think to yourself, yeah, that's me. So I'll read out a series of questions and just have a reflect and think whether or not that is something you do or something you definitely don't do. So here are the questions. The first one is a hand up or a bit of a nod to yourself if you always talk to people in elevators, aeroplanes, supermarkets, or wherever you go. I'm putting my hand up because, as you've probably guessed already from my introduction, that's definitely me. And what about those of you out there who have a colour-coded or otherwise organised wardrobe? My hands are most definitely firmly down on this one. Write down a list of things to do and stick to it. And then some of you may also be thinking that you make a list of things to do on the weekends. You'll notice that my hands are still very firmly down on this one. This is the controversial one. How many of you need to pick someone to race while driving? Hopefully none of you followed me into the office, for those of you that are in the office today. What about those of you who ask too many questions, or one of my personal favourites, those of you who push the lift button to remind the lift that you're there? Now, I'm imagining, I've done this many times in many sessions, and what I tend to see is a real mix of people kind of standing up, sitting down, looking around the room in disbelief, thinking, what on earth do you mean you organise your wardrobe in colour-coded or some other way? I'm interested to know what other way there may be. But the purpose of me doing this activity is because I think it's really important to recognise that we all do things naturally, that we sometimes assume that other people do the same. And this is to help us recognise that actually we do things differently to other people. Just because we do it doesn't mean that other people do it. So having some awareness of what other people do and how they do it and why they do it is really important when it comes to strengths. So just because we're good at them and we do them doesn't mean that everybody else does. And actually underneath each one of these questions is an underlying strength, believe it or not. And so it's about kind of recognising that we all have strengths, because I'm pretty sure at least one of those questions you were kind of putting your hand up. So just a bit of fun to start us thinking about the power of difference amongst people and kind of the strengths that bring us together. So as I mentioned, I'm going to talk a little bit now about the science behind strengths. So what I'm going to do here is show you some pictures. Just turn my webcam off for a sec while I just tell you a story about my colleagues. So these are people that I work with in the people team here at Cooper Parry, and their permission was definitely granted for me to get these photos. So on the top row, you can see my colleagues at around 3 years old. And when you're 3 years old, you've created over 1 billion neurons. Now, these neurons start to form in our brains before we're even born. So kind of when we're in the womb, our brains are creating neurons and then multiplying and multiplying and multiplying. So by the time you're 3, you've got 1 billion neurons. Each one of those billion neurons has over 150,000 connections. And so if you think about any babies, young children that you know, I happen to live with one, so know that this is 100% true. think of all the things that they're learning. So they're learning to crawl, to walk, to talk, to recognize people, eating solid foods, colors, letters, numbers, shapes. I mean, it's literally non-stop, isn't it, as you're growing up? And it's exhausting. So, we can't continue as adults to learn and consume information at that rate of knots. We would be definitely burnt out. So here you see pictures of my colleagues on the bottom row at 16 years old. So by the time you're 16, over 50% of those neurons have gone. So they've completely died off and probably never to be seen again. And although that sounds a little bit like a doom and gloom story, what I'm saying is that this is completely okay, because we don't want to be so conscious in our walking and eating and identifying of colours and shapes, etc. So there are many things now that we do kind of on autopilot, and that's because our brain has strengthened the neurons and the connections that we really need. They've got stronger and stronger and stronger as we have grown up, and some of those neurons and connections are different for different people, and this is where our strengths come from. So it's our brain, it's our neurons and connections and how they have formed that then form our strengths. So for example, if you think about it, I was a child who definitely liked to read and do imaginary play, and I love to be playing out with my friends all the time, and that definitely plays a part in the strengths that I have today. Some of us might have liked to kind of play quietly alone in the house. Some of us might have liked to play kind of on our computers. Some of us might have liked to be really sporty, read a lot, watch TV, all of the things that you liked to do as a child. If you think about them now and the way that you would play or communicate with people when you were younger, I bet there's not a lot of difference in some of the ways in which you go about your life today. So the message really here is that our strengths are as a result of how our brain is wired and shaped. So you've been hardwiring those strengths since you were younger, some consciously, some maybe not so. And what we're talking about here is how powerful it would be if we were actively using and tapping into our strengths every single day. So kind of reconnecting with ourselves. We go through so many days that we are not on autopilot and get to the end and think, what on earth happened there? But today, what I really want you to start thinking about is, what are those things that make you really great and that you enjoy doing? So the strengths movement, definitely with Gallup, was founded by a gentleman called Marcus Buckingham, and he wrote the book, Play to Your Strengths, Now Know Your Strengths, Go Find Your Strengths. He's written many books, and he's actually branched out from Gallup now. But I was listening to a podcast the other day where I heard him talk very eloquently about what a strength is and what it isn't, and I wanted to share that with you. So a strength is any activity that strengthens you, even if you're not good at it. So I really want you to think about that. And any activity that strengthens you, even if you are not good at it. And when we're talking about thinking about whether or not something strengthens you, it's do you look forward to it? Does time fly when you're doing it? Do you get to the end of doing that thing and feel really energized and like you could go and do it again straight away? So you might not be good at it, but if you look forward to it and you enjoy it and it energizes you, then that's a strength. And obviously the opposite of that is a weakness. So any activity that weakens you, even if you are good at it. So think about those things that you don't really look forward to, that you try and put off. When you're doing them, it feels like you've been doing it for an hour and literally it's 5 minutes. And those things that then when you've completed them, you just feel like a completely empty shell, a husk, I think Marcus calls it in the podcast. So you could be good at it. And I've got an example of kind of a story of my own later on that brings this to life. So something that strengthens you, you look forward to it, you're energized by it, and time goes really quickly. And there's a quote here, and I think, strength is about being in flow. There's a book by this guy whose name I'm unfortunately not going to attempt to pronounce, but the happiest people spend much of their time in a state of flow, the state in which people are so involved in an activity that nothing else seems to matter. So there's this direct correlation here between being happy and enjoying life and using your strengths, which I think is a really important thing to do. So I'm going to talk to you now about a little bit of research. So we've talked about some of the brain science behind strengths and what makes a strength, how hardwired they are, and how to think about in your own life what strengths might look like. So there's things that you enjoy doing and feeling flow when you're doing it. So I've got a question for you here. So Gallup have done tons of research, and for those of you that know Gallup will know that this is the case. They're kind of founded on the research that they do, predominantly in the United States, but more so in the UK recently. So they surveyed hundreds of thousands of people and asked them this question: at work, do you have the opportunity to do what you do best? And so I'm keen to hear from you. What percentage do you think said, yep, definitely, I have the opportunity to do what I do best? So if you can just pop that into the chat function, what percentage of people when surveyed said they have the opportunity to do what they do best? Let's see some of your answers. 64%, Megan's going high with 64%. I feel like I'm on a game show. It's definitely lower than 64% for those of you that haven't yet put your surveys in, your questions, your answers. 40%. Lower than 40, 50, definitely on the optimistic side here today. And I'm hopeful that this is your own reflection, that you're kind of, I get the opportunity to do what I do best. So hopefully other people would do the same. I'll put you out of your misery. Only 17% when surveyed said that they had the opportunity to do what they do best at work. So I think I just spotted a 10% in there. So it's a really low number, and if you think about that, it's pretty sad, isn't it, that the amount of time that we spend at work, only 17% of us feel that we have the opportunity to do what we do best. And really good for you to have a think about this question in relation to yourself. Do you have the opportunity to do what you do best every day? So my next question on the game show is, bear with me a sec. What typical percentage, so the same people surveyed, what typical percentage of your day do you spend playing to your strengths? So thinking about those things that give you energy, that you enjoy, that you're really good at or not so good at. What percentage of your day, when surveyed, did people say they spend playing to their strengths? Hit me with some numbers. I'll do my all higher, lower. 5%, I can assure you it's higher than 5%. We've gone the other way this time. 30%, slightly lower than 30. 60. We're actually looking at 15%. So 15% of people's day is spent playing to their strengths. So again, a slightly disappointing number. And again, I think it's really good, 20% now, which is a pretty good guess. I think it's a really good opportunity for you to, again, think about just kind of rather than going through the day on autopilot, what am I doing? Am I enjoying it? And am I playing to my strengths? And I think, it's really important that we do a bit of self-reflection and self-awareness on this. So I'm going to give you the rest of the numbers, don't worry. So the research again said that, there is a business benefit to people playing to their strengths. So if people are aware of their strengths and are using their strengths and doing work that they enjoy, then they're more productive, employee turnover is lower, and higher customer satisfaction or client satisfaction scores, kind of 38, 50 and 44%. So there's definite science behind business benefit. Now the other thing, it's great to have the numbers, but also the other thing that helps people if we're working in our strength zone is that people look forward to going to work. So, if you're doing things that you enjoy and give you energy, of course, work isn't going to feel quite so hard. You have more positive than negative interactions with co-workers because you're feeling much happier and more positive. You're treating customers or clients better because you're already in that kind of energized, happy zone. You tell your friends you work for a great company, you achieve more, especially if you're Megan with your achiever strength, and you have more positive, creative and innovative moments. Now, there's a couple of things that aren't on here that I personally think are really important from a strengths perspective as well, and that's that I think playing to your strengths gives you confidence because you feel great, you feel good, and you know that you're doing work that you enjoy. I think it gives you direction and purpose, but I think it also helps you work with kindness and hope. And I think, we know that the world needs to be just that little bit more kind, but if you start to appreciate your own strengths and other people's strengths, then it just gives you this kind of wider lens of which to look at the world and recognise and understand and put yourself in other people's shoes and vice versa, and just be a little bit more compassionate. And I am definitely all for that. Okay, so I recognise, hopefully you might have some questions, so don't forget, if you do have questions, pop them in the question box, and Steve will facilitate those for us later. So I'm dead keen to hear if you have got any questions. So here at Cooper Parry, and again coming from one of the Marcus Buckingham books called First Break All the Rules, we founded our strengths approach at Cooper Parry on some new rules. So for those of you that know Cooper Parry, it won't come as a surprise that we like a book called First Break All the Rules. And so this conventional rule here, which I think we recognise, which is treating everyone as you like to be treated yourself, and focusing on helping people to overcome their weaknesses. And this is a book about kind of leadership and management, but I think it's important to recognise that we do tend to have quite a lot of conversations. Historically and culturally, I can understand it. And, I've been in organisations myself where we've had end of year conversations with people, and we've been spending a lot of time talking about people's development areas and what they could do differently and what they could improve on. And sometimes that feels like a really draining conversation to have. And again, kind of this treat everyone as you like to be treated, I think comes back to this piece around compassion and kindness. And actually, we're all really different, aren't we? And we've definitely got to recognise that. So the new rule is about discovering people's differences and preferences. And I think this is really important, this whole piece around discovery. Like, we have to be curious, we have to talk to people, we have to really listen, and we have to kind of help them tap into and tap into ourselves, what's important for them, and how they like to work and what's good for them. And there's benefits to that, which again, I'll talk about in a bit. Treat everyone as they like to be treated, recognising that we're all individuals. And what if we just shifted that balance? I'm not saying we have to ignore people's weaknesses, but what if we shifted that balance away from the full conversation being about development areas to actually how can we focus more on applying and developing strengths? Having had these conversations with people myself, people in my own team, about what you're great at, what you enjoy, what you want to do more of, that is such kind of a higher energy conversation than talking about people's development areas. So it's a rule that we're kind of putting into play here at Cooper Parry, and we're definitely having more conversations about people's strengths. So talked a bit about the brain science, we talked a bit about what a strength is, and a little bit there around kind of some of the numbers and benefits of using strengths at work. So I kind of want to shift the focus now a little bit back onto you. And like I said, I want to start thinking about what might your strengths look like, and how can you discover them, and how can you start building on them as well. So I have put this picture up. This is myself and my colleague Emma, taken in two completely different organisations. So, there's this notion that anyone can excel at anything if they try hard enough, but let's not ignore our uniqueness as individuals. So this funny face pulling picture is myself and Emma working at Thornton's head office in 2013. So I've really gone through my iPhone archive to find this picture, as you can imagine. That's a lot of scrolling. So we had spent the day in Starbucks in Derby planning an engaging manager program. So we were planning this kind of leadership management program. Really excited. It was the first time we'd done anything like this at Thornton's. And we weren't designing the content here, we were doing the logistics. So we were working on what dates, what rooms did we need to book, how many people were we going to invite, how were we sending the invites out to store managers, etc. What resources did we need? We had to write facilitator notes for detailed people, so we had to really write in detail instructions. And as you can see from this picture, at the end of the day we were absolutely exhausted. So if you go back to that example that I gave earlier about feeling like a husk, we were definitely husks on that particular day. So the day just seemed to last forever. And we really weren't feeling energised by the end of it. Fast forward to 2016, the smiley picture. I am wearing a different t-shirt. It just looks like I've worn the same thing for 3 years solid. I promise I haven't. So this is myself and Emma at Boots. We worked at Boots together, and we had spent 3 days in a room with no windows, facilitating some leadership development with some of our leaders at Boots. We were helping them with their self-awareness, with change, with kind of their personal leadership stories. It was really everybody was really emotionally invested in this particular day. And we finished the day, we felt amazing, and we were like, why would anybody want to do any other job in the world than this one? So this was like 3 days in a room with no windows, but doing what we loved. It flew by, we enjoyed it, we felt great. So this is kind of my personal story around kind of the difference between a strength and a weakness, and kind of working in those environments that you are energized by. So don't get me wrong, I can do the logistics, I can do the planning, we did, it all went swimmingly. It's not that we were rubbish at it, we just didn't enjoy it, and we just didn't get any energy from it. So my lesson here, I think, is definitely know what your strengths are. Sometimes you've just got to get the job done, haven't you? There was no way we could do kind of the facilitating and the great stuff without some of the logistics. So, you've got to kind of suck it up and do it. But also, were we the very best pairing to be doing this work? Definitely maybe not the logistics side of things. So, it's a little bit around knowing your own strengths, which is brilliant, but also knowing and understanding other people's, and not be put off if they're completely different to yours, because actually, as I now know, there is great value in working with people whose strengths are really different and complementary to yours. So had I have worked with Megan on the logistics and the organising side of things here, we would have probably done it in half a day, and one of us would be looking like the right-hand side of this particular picture. So I've mentioned we work with Gallup, and they're a global performance management company, tons of years of research and looking at attitudes, behaviours, psychology around things. Lots of strengths tools out there. Gallup is the one that we use. We use them for lots of different things within Cooper Parry. So we use them as a basis of our wellbeing model, and we also use their employee engagement tool as well. So Gallup are kind of really embedded within Cooper Parry, but I do recognise there are lots of different opportunities to do strengths out there. So Gallup have got 34 strengths, and you can see some of them up here now. And I thought what would be really great, so some of them obviously need a little bit of explaining, like woo, but I think some of them are quite self-explanatory. And what I'd love you to do is just have a real quick scan of these strengths, and I'm dead keen to hear from you as to whether or not any of them jump out at you as thinking, yeah, do you know what, I'm pretty sure that would be a strength of mine. So strategic, intellection, adaptability, ideation, which is about kind of creative ideas and things, empathy. And so if you can just share in the chat what strengths jump out at you that you think, if you were to do the survey, if you haven't already, what strengths do you think would come out? If you have done it, then I'm just dead keen to hear what your top strength was. So type them in the chat, and then I will have a quick look and see what we've got in our group today. Woo is the one that I've got, winning others over. So that's the one around kind of networking and chatting to people, doing the small talk, meeting new people, getting them to connect with you. Strategic jumps out at me, yeah, that's a good one. I'm looking at the bigger picture, the future. Strategic, very good. Any others? Responsibility, yeah. So we heard Megan talk about responsibility at the beginning of the webinar. Empathy, restorative, deliberative, very good. Empathy is a great one. I think sometimes there's not enough empathy in organisations and businesses, and so people kind of sometimes try to play down their empathy strength, but actually it's one that should definitely be played out more. I think probably in the last 6 months, people's empathy strengths have probably come into play more than ever, and how valuable they've probably been within organisations. Cool. Okay, so let's highlighted my own here, so I don't know whether or not you need to see them again. But so I've mentioned that I wanted to give you a bit of an activity to start thinking about your own strengths. So if you haven't had the opportunity to do a strengths questionnaire, or you want to introduce strengths to your own team and you're just not sure where to start, then this is a really good activity to do to start those conversations. So, sometimes you don't need a questionnaire to be able to have a conversation with others or yourself about what your strengths might be. So what I'm going to suggest you do is take a blank page in your notebook, and for those of you that aren't stationary obsessed like me, it might just be a blank Word document, and I want you to kind of have two columns: loved it at the top of one column and loathed it at the top of the other column. Loved it and loathed it. And then I want you to keep a record, probably for about a week, and every time you come across something that you look forward to, that you do and time flies, and then you get to the end of it and you're energized by it, then that goes in the love it column. But write down whatever that task might be. And then obviously the opposite, you dread doing it, time is dragging, and you get to the end of it and you feel like I did on that picture in Starbucks, then that goes in the loathed it column. So you'll start to kind of build up this picture of what are those things that I love doing, that I'm energized by and that I enjoy. What are those things that I really dread doing and don't look forward to them, and they drain my energy. They go in the loathed it column. And then at the end of the week, what I want you to do is kind of go back and just review those two lists, and then start to think about what it's telling you and what it's showing you. And, have a conversation with somebody, a colleague, a partner, a line manager, and show them kind of, this is what I've been collecting. This is what I think it's telling me. What do you see? Kind of have those conversations. If you want to do it with people you work with, I think it's a brilliant kind of discussion point around, actually, do you know what? I didn't realise that you loved doing that. How brilliant. How can we help you do more of it? Oh, I didn't realise you didn't love doing that. How can we help you kind of move away from doing that? So really great opportunity to have conversations with people to help them understand that we're all a little bit different, and actually to start to understand your own strengths and looking at your day. And, a question that I often get asked, and I don't know if it will be in the questions here, so I'm preempting it, is, we can't always avoid those things that we loathe, can we? And we definitely can't. But by getting some self-awareness of those things that we love and those things that we loathe, and recognising in ourselves kind of when we best work or how we best work, or, do the tasks that you loathe at the beginning of the day if that works better for you, or save them till the end. Give yourself a little treat for doing them. There are ways and means in which you can get the tasks done so you can focus more on what you love. But also, your loathe could very well be somebody else's love. So the more you talk to people and the more you understand other people and what their strengths are, the more you'll be able to work together. And, there is so much power in collaboration and working with other people that it's just really a great thing to do. Harder, of course, when we're virtual, but in some respects also a bit easier in that we're not always kind of trying to be in the same place at the same time. So, I really, really encourage you to spend some time reflecting on your own strengths, the things you don't love so much, but also connecting with other people and having discussions about what people enjoy doing at work. It's really a really important thing to do. And so, kind of one of my final slides really here is, we share this slide a lot here at CP. So this is very much about remembering that we're all unique. We're all a little bit weird. We all have our own quirks, but we're all also amazing. And we all have our own superpowers. We all have things that we're great at. And it's about using those skills complementary. So coming together, being this really powerful super team, use your strengths in the right way. It's not an excuse, so I can't do that because it's not a strength. Use them in the right way, use them to the best of their abilities, and just see how powerful that can be. So my final slide is, my penultimate slide is a quote from Marcus Buckingham, which I really loved, and it was around, your career should be an ongoing scavenger hunt, a deliberate search for the things that strengthen you. And I think kind of approaching your career with this lens of, I'm going to hunt out today the things that I love and enjoy doing and that energize me, I just think is a really great lens to look at work and your career through. So, you know, just looking, finding out, understanding, talking to people, and, you know, as you go through your career, compiling a list of those things that are your strengths, and focusing on them. And they are great information points. It's great data to then help you shape what your next role or future role might look like. And, you know, looking for an organisation or a business or a role that nurtures those things and welcomes them and recognises them, like we do here at Cooper Parry. So, you know, a really great way to look at the world. So I promise that this is actually my final slide. So this is just some resources here that I think are interesting. So there's a book on flow, there's a book on discovering your strengths. Strengths is part of the positive psychology movement, and this book is kind of one that I refer back to all the time. It's like positive psychology in a nutshell. And, you know, webinars, podcasts, loads of things that you can discover about strengths. This is the link to the Gallup Strengths Centre. So if you wanted to do the Gallup Strengths, you can click there. Marcus Buckingham has his own website and his own organisation now that look at strengths. And my understanding was through the pandemic, he was giving the strengths test away for free. So I'm not sure if that still is the case, but definitely worth a look. And then, you know, I'm a qualified Gallup Strengths coach. So if any of you wanted to grab a coffee or chat a little bit further about your strengths, then I'm more than happy to try and do that. So, or even if you've just got a question, you want to drop me a note afterwards, then that's all well and good as well. So that's it from me. I hope you have enjoyed the session. I hope it's given you lots to think about, and I'm excited to hear from you as to what your strengths might be. Thank you.
Hi Steve, I'm just wondering if there's any questions that have come through.
No, I've asked people for questions, and I think you've done such an amazing job. They haven't done it, or they're really slow at typing. So maybe there's something coming in. I mean, Stacey Tate has said thank you, but nothing as of yet.
We'll give it maybe a minute more, and then if not, we'll wrap up.
We're getting lots of thank yous. I think that's where we're at.
Thanks Emily for your strength session.
Well, Megan, we have some questions.
Oh,
this is fantastic. So we have a question from Hayley. Do you see circumstances of where weaknesses have become strengths?
Good question, Hayley. I think what we tend to say to people is it's very unlikely. If you were to do the Gallup Strengths profile now and then were to do it again in 10 years' time, it is very, very unlikely that your bottom 3 strengths are going to become your top 3 strengths, because, you know, you're just not going to spend as much time on those things because they don't energize you, or you don't enjoy them, or you're not great at them necessarily. So I would say that your strengths might shift around in the top kind of 5-10, but it's very unlikely that something that you aren't so great at suddenly becomes something that you're really good at. I think, you know, there are schools of thought out there potentially that disagree, but I think, you know, my personal view is if you go back to what a strength is, something that energizes you, that you enjoy, and that you know, time goes quickly, I'm definitely not going to ever really look forward to doing detailed analysis or logistics. That's just never going to be my bag, but I'm always going to love walking into a room and chatting to people. So yeah, I don't think those things are ever going to swap over. There may be stories out there of people who think differently, but yeah, that's my personal view on that. Thank you. Good question, Hayley. Any others?
just got one back in now from Hayley again. So poring over spreadsheets, which I hate, isn't going to suddenly become enjoyable. So I think that confirms it.
Yeah, I agree. Let's never work together on spreadsheets, Hayley, because that's not going to be good for either of us. I love spreadsheets. No,
Okay,
so just to Hayley's point, sorry, I think it's not suddenly going to become enjoyable, but you either get it out of the way early on, do it later on, give yourself a little treat or reward for getting it done, or partner with somebody that is really good at it and probably knows things about spreadsheets that you don't and can make it quicker or easier for you. That would be my advice.
And we have a question here. Are there particular strengths that you see that tax and accounting people have in common?
Say that again. That beginning bit again. Sorry, Steve.
Are there any particular strengths that you see tax and accounting people have in common?
Okay, so I think you don't tend to see that people have the same sorts of strengths, but there are definitely trends. So within Cooper Parry, I would say we have a lot of people with achiever strength. And there's not a lot of data from Gallup, interestingly, even though there's a lot of data on lots of things, that there is correlation between strengths and the work that you do. And that goes back to we're all very different, but definitely at Cooper Parry we have high achiever strengths, and we have people that like to get things done. But then if you think about the HR team, we have a huge mix of strengths, and we have a couple of people within the people team who have achiever as their strength as well. So it's not necessarily conducive with the job or the organisation, but there are definitely patterns, I think, and that's inevitable. I think when we're recruiting people that we look for similar sorts of skills to ourselves often, don't we? But we also have, I reckon within the organisation there are people with pretty much nearly every strength on that list of 34, so you can tend to find somebody that can help you with something. Thank you, that's a really good question. I don't know who it was from, but a good one.
I have a quick question, and I know I'm not on this, but do you see any relationships with high performing teams with managers who understand the strengths of their teams?
Yeah, for sure. So we have our R&D team within Cooper Parry have done a lot of work on their strengths individually. We've done a lot of team sessions. They use strengths when they recruit into the team, and they're a particularly high performing team within the business. So they're one of our kind of the stories that we tell at our culture carnivals and things about successful teams. I think anything that you can do as a team where you know people beyond the work that they do and the tasks that they do is only going to help strengthen relationships. So, great teams are all about trust and collaboration and, understanding and support and challenge. And, in order to do all of that stuff, you need to know people and know what makes them tick and what's important to them. And strengths is definitely one way that you can do that. And as a line manager, knowing what your team's strengths are has got to be just really invaluable data to help you get the best out of them.
Well, we have a fab question. This is something that we were talking about just before we started the webinar. This is from Hayley. Sometimes strengths presented by women can be viewed more negatively than the same strengths in males. Do you have any tips on helping people through negative responses in their strengths?
So a really good question, Hayley, thank you. And I think empathy is one, isn't it? So when I mentioned empathy earlier, I think that's probably one that is talked about quite a bit, and harmony probably being another. And I think we always have to focus on the fact that they are strengths, and we have to talk about them in the positive. And, you know, I have facilitated sessions before, definitely with kind of mixed genders within the room, and we've had some pretty hot topical debates about empathy. I think focusing on the fact that it's a strength and therefore what it brings and what that person then brings with them to the team, the situation, the client, you know, all of those things are really important, because sometimes I think we're definitely hardwired to be quite self-deprecating and talk about what we're not so good at, or you know, revert to our, oh goodness, you know, I've got this strength, but you know, sometimes it means this. We have to, I think, if we know what our strengths are, we have to become really familiar with them and know them really well and be able to articulate them in the positive. So what we do in some of our team sessions is we get people to write out their strength and what it means for them in the positive. It has to be in the positive. And then we get them to go around the room. We used to 6 months ago, get them to go around the room and say it out loud to somebody. And people cringe so much because, you know, they don't like speaking so positively outwardly about themselves. But you have to get into the practice and the habit of doing that. And, you know, equally, there's a couple of strengths. I can't remember off the top of my head, like self-assurance is kind of the flip side of that. So people that feel really confident, know themselves, you know, can walk into a room and command it. You know, sometimes that's seen as quite overpowering, etc. But there are plus sides to the fact that they're called strengths is the clue, I suppose. But yeah, definitely own it, talk about it in the positive, recognise what it is that you bring, and then be able to articulate that really powerfully, rather than going, oh, well, you know, I've got this strength, it's empathy. You know, it's all about how you say it out loud, own it, and the body language that goes with it, is my response.
Right, I'll put then, thanks for such a good session. I always enjoy your strength sessions, so.
Thank you, Megan.
I've learnt a lot again. Hopefully we'll have all learnt the science behind our strengths. We'll be able to identify our strengths, and we'll also know how to use them in everyday life. Before I go, I'd like to mention we've got another event coming up in October, which will be a panel show type webinar, which will be held by the committee, and it'll be focused on their experiences through COVID-19 pandemic, their experience of working from home, and the challenges they faced. When I had it explained to me, I thought it sounded great, and I'll definitely be attending that one. The link will be going on the Women in Tax LinkedIn page. So if you're not already part of that group, go and join it, and then as soon as the link comes out for signing up, you'll be able to find it in there. I hope you've all enjoyed today's session and taken something from it, and we hope to see you at another session soon.